Welcome, brave souls, to another bone-chilling tale from the nightmare maestro. Have you ever experienced that spine-chilling sensation of being watched when you're alone at night? The way your skin prickles, your breath catches, and your rational mind tries to dismiss what your instincts are screaming. Morgan Walsh couldn't believe her luck when she landed a regular babysitting gig in Oakwood Estates, the most exclusive gated community in town. The Hendersons' modern smart home was a masterpiece of glass and steel, with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering panoramic views of the manicured lawns and identical luxury homes that lined the streets. At 19, she was making more in one night than she would in a week at her campus coffee shop job. The rain drummed against the massive windows as Morgan settled into her usual routine, the droplets creating shifting patterns that danced across the imported marble floors. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were at their monthly charity gala, leaving her alone in the pristine house with their 2 teenage boys. The couple's departure had been a flurry of last-minute instructions and reassurances about the smart home's security system, a recent upgrade prompted by a series of break-ins in neighboring communities. Thunder rolled in the distance as Morgan moved through the house's open-concept lower level, her footsteps echoing off the minimalist decor and stark white walls. She had already ordered dinner, queued up her favorite streaming shows, and was looking forward to a peaceful evening of studying once the boys went to bed. The house's automated systems responded to her presence like an attentive butler, adjusting the temperature and lighting as she walked from room to room. As she curled up on the plush sectional sofa, something caught her eye through the wall of windows, a brief flash of light from the vacant house next door. Morgan froze, her psychology textbook forgotten in her lap. The Matthews house had been empty for months, ever since the family relocated overseas for some prestigious job opportunity. She knew, because Mrs. Henderson often complained about how the empty property affected their home's value. Her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass as she lamented the situation during Morgan's post-babysitting debriefings. The flash came again, like the reflection of a phone screen or a camera lens, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. But Morgan knew she hadn't imagined it, just as she knew that the growing unease in her stomach wasn't just paranoia. Something about that house had always felt off, even when the Matthews still lived there. The way its windows seemed to watch the street like dark, hungry eyes. The smart home's automated systems hummed to life as darkness fell, illuminating the interior with warm, recessed lighting that transformed the windows into perfect mirrors. Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that the reflection was hiding something in the darkness beyond. Like a two-way mirror in an interrogation room, she tried to focus on her textbook, highlighting passages about cognitive dissonance and perception bias. But her eyes kept drifting to the Matthews house. That's when she noticed it, a strange rectangular shape in one of their upstairs windows, like a piece of paper taped to the glass. It hadn't been there during her previous visits. She was certain because she'd developed a habit of scanning the neighboring houses during her stays, a routine born from equal parts boredom and curiosity about how the other half lived. The paper seemed to glow faintly in the sporadic flashes of lightning, its edges curling slightly as if it had been exposed to moisture. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from Mrs. Henderson checking in. "Everything okay? Boys behaving?" As Morgan typed her reply, she noticed her reflection in the window had a strange double image, like someone else's silhouette was superimposed over hers. She whirled around, heart pounding, but the living room was empty, save for the gentle hum of the smart home systems and the persistent drumming of rain against glass. The boys called down from upstairs, asking for a snack before bed. Morgan welcomed the distraction, but as she moved toward the kitchen, she caught a glimpse of movement in the Matthews house, a shadow passing behind that mysterious paper in the window. The rational part of her mind supplied possible explanations. A curtain moving in the draft, a tree branch swaying in the wind, even a stray animal that had somehow gotten inside. But none of these explanations accounted for the deliberate way the shadow had moved, or why it had stopped precisely behind that paper. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a split second, the entire neighborhood was illuminated in stark relief. In that brief moment of clarity, Morgan saw something that made her blood run cold. More papers in other windows, dozens of them, their edges fluttering like pale moths trapped against the glass. The boys had gone to bed, and Morgan's curiosity waged war with her growing sense of unease. She found herself drawn to the kitchen windows, which offered the clearest view of the Matthews house. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, no longer obscuring her view of the mysterious papers that seemed to multiply every time she looked at them. Using her phone's camera zoom, she tried to get a better look at the nearest one, the image grainy but slowly coming into focus. Her hands began trembling so violently, she nearly dropped the phone. It wasn't just any paper, it was a photograph. Even from this distance, she recognized the red sweater she'd worn last week while babysitting. The image showed her standing on the Hendersons' front porch, checking her phone while waiting to be let in. The quality was surprisingly good, clearly taken with a high-end camera by someone who knew what they were doing. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the house in stuttering snapshots that revealed more horrifying details. Each paper in each window was a photograph, and every single one was of her. Morgan getting out of her car, Morgan helping the boys with their homework through the living room windows, Morgan studying on the sofa, exactly where she'd been sitting minutes ago. Some photos were from angles that seemed impossible, as if the photographer had been floating in midair or shooting through walls. The timestamps visible in the corner of some photos spanned months, long before the Matthews had moved away, which meant either they had been involved or someone else had been using their empty house. Morgan's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had the break-ins Mrs. Henderson mentioned been related? Was the photographer watching her right now, adding new photos to their grotesque gallery? She zoomed in on another photo, this one showing her asleep on the sofa during a late-night sitting job last month. She hadn't known anyone had been watching her during her most vulnerable moments. The thought made her skin crawl, but she couldn't look away. In the background of that photo, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure standing at the Matthews window. Their camera raised to capture the shot of the photo currently in their window. An impossible recursive image that shouldn't exist. The smart home security panel chimed, indicating motion at the front door. Morgan checked the app on her phone with trembling fingers, but the camera showed only rain and swaying trees in the glow of the motion-activated floodlights. The timestamp showed 10:47 p.m., exactly the same time as one of the photos she'd seen in the Matthews window. Her breath caught as she pulled up the activity log, scrolling through months of data she'd never thought to check before. What she found sent chills down her spine. For the past 3 months, the system had been detecting motion around the house's perimeter almost every night she'd worked, always between 9 p.m. and midnight. The alerts formed a pattern, showing movement that circled the house like a predator stalking its prey. Most disturbing were the gaps in the footage. Brief moments when the cameras would go dark, only to resume showing nothing unusual. More unsettling was the list of devices connected to the Hendersons' Wi-Fi network. Among the expected phones and tablets was an unknown device, labeled only with a string of numbers. According to the log, it had been connecting and disconnecting regularly, always on her babysitting nights. The location data placed it somewhere between the two houses, its signal strength fluctuating as if the device was moving. Morgan's fingers flew across the screen as she dug deeper into the system's settings. The Hendersons' smart home was top of the line, with features she'd never explored before. One of them was a network visualization tool that mapped connected devices in relation to the house. The unknown device appeared as a blinking dot, currently active and moving slowly along the property line. As she watched, it began to draw closer to the house. The security system's interface suddenly flickered, its clean lines dissolving into static before reformatting with new information. Additional devices began appearing on the network, their ID numbers sequential as if part of a coordinated system. Each one represented a camera or recording device, forming a web of surveillance around the house. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone hadn't just been watching her, they'd managed to integrate their equipment into the very system meant to keep her safe. A power surge from the storm briefly plunged the house into darkness, the smart home systems rebooting with an ominous series of chimes and clicks. When the lights flickered back on, Morgan's reflection in the windows had changed. The house's lighting now created a perfect fishbowl effect. She could see every detail inside with crystal clarity, but the darkness beyond was impenetrable. Except now, she wasn't alone in that reflection. Standing in the Matthews upstairs window was a distinct figure, their features obscured by the professional camera they held raised to their face. The lens caught the occasional lightning flash, sending pinpricks of light across the distance between houses. As Morgan watched, frozen in horror, the figure lowered the camera slowly, deliberately, wanting her to see them seeing her. Their face remained in shadow, but their posture conveyed a sense of satisfaction, of a game well played. A notification popped up on Morgan's phone. Someone was trying to share a photo with her through AirDrop. The sender's name was a string of numbers matching the unknown device on the network. Her thumb trembled as she accepted it, already knowing what she would see. The photo had been taken seconds ago, showing her staring out the window with fear written across her face. In the reflection behind her, barely visible, was another figure, this one inside the Hendersons' house. The caption read, "Look behind you." Morgan's survival instincts kicked in before her mind could fully process what she'd seen. She dove behind the kitchen island just as heavy footsteps crossed the living room, where she'd been standing moments before. The smart home's lighting system detected the movement, helpfully brightening to illuminate the intruder's path. Morgan clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle her breathing. Her phone clutched against her chest as if it were a lifeline to the outside world. Through the reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator, she caught glimpses of the figure methodically searching the room. They moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the space, wearing what appeared to be a maintenance uniform, complete with a tool belt. A professional camera hung around their neck, swaying slightly with each calculated step. The realization hit her like a physical blow. All those service calls the Hendersons had scheduled, the recent security system upgrades, the intermittent Wi-Fi interruptions. They had literally invited their stalkers in. Her phone vibrated silently against her palm, the screen casting a betraying glow that she quickly smothered against her sweater. Another airdropped photo appeared, this one showing her current hiding spot from an angle that could only have come from the Matthews house. The caption read, "The boys are still sleeping. Wouldn't want them to wake up, would we?" It was a threat and a taunt wrapped into one, designed to keep her from calling for help or making a run for the teenagers upstairs. The timestamp showed it had been taken just seconds ago, confirming her worst fear. There were more of them watching, coordinating their sick game. The security panel on the wall suddenly lit up with a soft chime that seemed deafening in the tense silence. It began displaying a slideshow of photos, each one appearing with a mechanical precision that matched the intruder's footsteps. Morgan recognized them as the same ones from the Matthews windows, but now she could see the full scope of their surveillance operation. Every image was meticulously dated and labeled with technical details, aperture settings, timestamps, even weather conditions, creating a timeline of her movements over months. Some photos showed her in other houses, suggesting their operation extended far beyond just the Hendersons' home. The final photo was different, a group shot of multiple people in maintenance uniforms, all wearing cameras, standing inside what looked like the Matthews' empty living room. Their faces were obscured by camera lenses turned toward the viewer, like a grotesque family portrait. In the background, dozens of monitors showed live feeds from various houses in the neighborhood. A message began typing itself across the security panel. "Smile for us, Morgan. You're part of our collection now." Lightning crackled across the sky as Morgan's mind raced through her options. The intruder's footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the soft electronic whir of a camera focusing. Then she remembered something crucial. Her student job at the campus IT help desk had taught her about network security. With trembling fingers, she accessed the smart home's admin panel through her phone, thanking whatever deity was listening that Mrs. Henderson had shared the password in case of emergencies. In a desperate gambit, Morgan triggered the emergency lockdown protocol. Metal shutters designed to protect against hurricanes slammed down over every window and door, sealing the house and plunging it into darkness. The intruder cursed as their carefully orchestrated surveillance network went dark. More importantly, the shutters had cut off their communication with their partners in the Matthews house. The thunderous sound of metal barriers deploying echoed through the house like war drums. The home's security system reverted to backup power, bathing everything in dim red emergency lighting that transformed the modern interior into something from a nightmare. Morgan could hear the intruder speaking urgently into a radio, receiving only static in response. Through the crimson haze, she caught glimpses of them frantically trying to override the system through their tablet. But their administrator access had been revoked the moment the lockdown initiated. She used the distraction to her advantage, silently pulling up the house's blueprint on her phone. The Hendersons' panic room was concealed behind a panel in the kitchen. If she could reach it, she could access the direct line to police dispatch. Each step felt like an eternity as she crept across the floor, hyper-aware of every shadow in the blood-red lighting. As Morgan's fingers found the edge of the hidden panel, her phone lit up one final time. The last photo showed the interior of the panic room, taken months ago during installation. The caption read, "We thought you might try this. Remember, we installed everything." But Morgan allowed herself a grim smile as she pressed the panel. Because what the stalkers didn't know was that she'd helped the Hendersons change all their security codes just last week, after she'd noticed unusual activity on their network. The panic room door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and Morgan heard the intruder's startled exclamation turn to rage. As she sealed herself inside, multiple screens lit up showing security feeds. She watched as police vehicles silently approached the house, their lights off to maintain the element of surprise. On another monitor, she saw figures trying to escape the Matthews house, only to be met by tactical units emerging from the shadows. The police would later discover an elaborate operation involving multiple maintenance companies across several gated communities. The Matthews house had been converted into a high-tech surveillance hub, its empty rooms filled with monitors, servers, and photography equipment. The stalkers had targeted not just Morgan, but dozens of babysitters and housekeepers across the neighborhood, documenting their routines for months before making their move. But they never counted on someone turning their own surveillance obsession against them. In the end, their undoing was the very technology they'd used to trap their victims. The photos they'd so carefully collected became evidence their hidden cameras provided footage of their own crimes, and their network of devices led investigators straight to their other targets, and to the encrypted servers containing years of stalking data across multiple states. So next time you're alone at night and you catch a glimpse of movement in a darkened window, ask yourself, who else might be watching the Watchers? Sweet dreams, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales.